Hi everyone, and welcome back to day 3 of our 12 days of SwitchUp.
Yeah, so today we're going to look at games that we would say give AAA games a run for their money. In some respects they might be better, but in some other respects they almost put them to shame, don't they, you know?
Yeah, plus the algorithm loves that name, so, you know.
Well, that too, of course, yeah. We did do one of these last year for our 12 days of SwitchUp, and we have tried to pick 10 completely different games this time. So we'll link to last year's one if you want to see 10 other games, but hopefully these are all fresh games for this new list.
As with all of these things, if you want to save 10% on your eShop codes, as so many people have done, and we really appreciate that, go to switchup.gg and use code SwitchUp. There's also pre-orders and other bits and bobs on there if you want to do that. So, what are 10 games that we think are put in AAA to shame? Well, let's find out. First up then, we've got the lovely Anno Mutationum. This is essentially a Cyberpunk RPG. Very quirky as well. It takes a lot of those unusual elements that you wouldn't really pay a huge amount of attention to and highlights them. There's like a tournament halfway through that's a bit like Street Fighter.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so you're like in the middle of the street and there's this weird old guy like spouting nonsense. And if you keep the conversation going with him, he suddenly invites you to take part in this big tournament. And it's little bits like that that kind of stand out amongst what otherwise would be a relatively straightforward cyberpunk RPG. You know, you've got your side-scrolling combat, that kind of stuff. Have you seen this one?
I remember it coming out. I remember you reviewing it. I haven't played it myself, but I do like. I love Cyberpunk anyway. You know, anything to do with Cyberpunk does poke my interest. But as with everything that's the case with things like zombies back in the day, it starts to become used so much, doesn't it? So it's nice to see, as you say, it's got these quirky little additions to the gameplay to keep it fresh.
Absolutely, yeah. So for me, that would definitely be one. This is an easy pick, and it's recently received a massive patch as well. Putting AAA to shame.
Nice. A big thank you to Platonic Friends for sponsoring today's video via their new release, Lil Gator Game. As mentioned, this was published by Platonic Friends and developed by Mega Wobble and released on the 14th of December and currently offers a 30% discount. It's a beautiful 60 frames per second adventure title which encapsulates the feeling of being a child and just wanting to play in the environment. It takes the threat out of the adventure but still keeps the actual enjoyment. You can slide around on your shield, drift by using an old t-shirt as a parachute, and you are joined by a group of friends who are trying to help you to entice your now older sister back into playing games with you and putting her grown-up work down. You and your new friends will even work together to make yourself a fortress out of an old playground. There's a simplified crafting system, loads of hidden areas and challenges to take part in, and it's one of those experiences that is just so easy to pick up and play, all enhanced by a quite beautiful soundtrack. As mentioned briefly earlier, Lil Gator Game has a 30% discount available from the prices shown at the bottom of the screen, and this lasts until the 21st of December. No better time to pick up this very charming experience, definitely one not to miss out on. Once again, thank you to Platonic Friends for sponsoring this episode. Right, my first one then would be Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Shredder's Revenge. Now this is published by .emu Games, but it's developed by Tribute Games, who have a few employees that used to work for another company that created the Scott Pilgrim beat-em-up. Oh, okay. And you can definitely see that seeping into this game. It's because when you hear .emu you expect it to be like Streets of Rage 4,
yeah,
but it's not at all. It's very manic. It's all about crowd control. You've got so many more enemies at once. It's kind of about getting about the screen, and obviously that lends itself brilliantly to co-op.
Nice.
And it's got local and online.
Can you still throw people into the camera?
You can, yep, they've kept that. It's basically a love letter to Turtles in Time, one of my favourite games of all time, if not my favourite game, but done in a way that's really updated the formula to the point where objectively this is a better game, but my nostalgia for that old game can't stop me from loving that one more, you know. But in terms of mechanics, this is absolutely top notch, a fantastic beat 'em up.
Which is better, this or Streets of Rage 4?
It's a difficult question, but because they're different, I think they can kind of coexist.
Yeah.
You know, Streets of Rage is a little bit more about precision and kind of a bit of a slow build up. You can take out enemies with a bit more nuance. This is very much about just getting about the screen, as I said, taking out all the enemies as quick as you can. They provide two very different experiences and they're both fantastic.
My next one then, and I'd say it was almost forgotten by a lot of channels because it came out in a very busy period, and it's Forged in Shadow Torch, F.I.S.T. is the acronym?
Acronym, yeah.
That's the one. It's a Metroidvania featuring a bunny rabbit with a giant fist that you can basically change out for different attachables. Things like drills. You can use it to helicopter down. I really liked it. I thought it was very well done. It needed a bit of work at launch, and they have since patched it up quite significantly. And yeah, it's just a very impressive Metroidvania.
Yeah, there's so many Metroidvanias these days, aren't there? And it's always nice to see, if not a fresh take necessarily, just a new way of introducing that idea of how you gain your new abilities to get to new areas. And obviously this time it's all around that idea of your fist and being able to replace that, which is quite a nice premise. And I will say that this one has now got a physical release because it didn't at launch.
Oh, nice.
So if you were waiting for that, then you can now pick it up physically.
This is probably the epitome of this series, and this is one single developer who created a game called Bright Memory, which was essentially a tech demo for his abilities. It was a first-person shooter, but it looked so much better than it had any right to. Now, since then, he's released Bright Memory Infinite, and I think it's the Gold Edition, which took the same visual quality, but he created a full start-to-finish, story-driven first-person shooter. And it just looks incredible, doesn't it?
Yeah, it looks fantastic. I think I'm right in saying when this first released, it was episodic as well.
Yes.
And it was, even with that, it was still very short. So obviously, as you said, took that idea, took the concept and expanded it. And it looks incredibly impressive, really does.
It won't take you too long to work your way through it, but it's one of those as well where you really do feel like you're supporting someone's passion rather than putting your funds into some huge Call of Duty 24.
Yeah, of course.
Next up then, we've got the game called Baldo, which was released from Spanish developers Naps team, and it had so much hype surrounding it that they could never live up to that. Unfortunately, and I think it's fair to say, at launch, it wasn't a game that anyone expected, and probably not them either, Since then, they've worked to patch it up extensively. We've got an episode on the channel called The Resurrection of Baldo, and I'd suggest watching that. But it's a 50-hour long Zelda-like with some other adventure game elements in there, and it looks beautiful, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I think this is a nice story, if you like, of how these days we can be very cynical of something being released, not finished or needing huge patches, etc. I think sometimes we may forget that if it's one person, doesn't mean they need any extra points for it or credit for it, but if they do release it and they aren't happy, the fact that they've gone to such extremes to remedy that.
Yeah.
And create almost a new game in some respects. I do think that needs at least mentioning.
Yeah, definitely. And I know they're not finished with this one. I'll leave it at that.
Oh, there we go.
Then we've got the very stylish Neon White. I'm trying to remember the name of the series that's on Switch. Travis Touchdown, what's that?
No More Heroes.
No More Heroes. This is as if you took No More Heroes styling and kind of flavour and put it into a first-person parkour game. It's very unusual. You find yourself in hell within like 5 minutes of the game starting. The only way to work your way out is to essentially go through these stages. It's really quite odd. It has those weird quirky things in it. Like, I believe there's like angels in there that are like animals and stuff.
Right.
Just odd things. But the core mechanic of doing those stages and trying to, it encourages you to cheat your way through.
Yeah, I remember putting this one in an upcoming video before our review. And it was the hardest game to describe without having seen anything of it. There was a blurb, of course, on the eShop, but it really didn't do the game justice. No. And I couldn't, even after putting it in the video, I still couldn't work out what it was. And then to see it in action, you can see why it's hard to describe, because it's very original, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. And there is a good story running through it. But like Glenn says, this one you need to play to appreciate how good it is. But we do have a full review if you want to check it out.
Right, our next game then is Zombie Army 4. This, of course, comes from Rebellion, who are very good at their third-person shooters. And as well as their Sniper Elite series, you have this Zombie Army series, which is much more manic, isn't it?
It's absolute chaos. We wanted to mention one of the Rebellion games. They've got their Sniper Elite series, like Glenn says. But this one, I think it's one of the latest ones they've released. And it kind of refines a lot of the gameplay and the shooting mechanics. But it's brilliant for playing in co-op as well, isn't it?
Yeah, co-op's great fun in this. As you say, of course, Sniper Elite 2. For me, just my personal tastes, I'm not so much with stealth. So being a sniper isn't necessarily for me, as much as I still enjoy the games. But these games, they're just absolute, as you say, carnage on screen at once. And they are so much fun.
Yeah, this one, just so you know, includes all of the Season 1 content, so it's 3 additional levels, character packs, and all that good stuff. And it's usually on sale as well.
Yes, as are the other Rebellion games, so ones to look out for.
Next up then, we've got Return to Monkey Island, which came out quite recently, was a massive surprise after Ron Gilbert basically said, I'll never do another Monkey Island. Here we are. Brilliant. Doesn't use the old point and click mechanics, really adapts it for the modern platform. You know, controlling your character with one stick, using the bumpers. It's just very fluid. It's got all your favourite voice actors in there from the original games if you played them. I wouldn't say you need to have played those games to enjoy this, but it would certainly help because it basically picks up right after number 2, when they're like little kids.
Yeah, so I've only played the first 2 of these. LeChuck's Revenge, was that the second one?
Yeah.
If memory serves me. Played them kind of after the event on Xbox, I believe, and did really enjoy them. They do have that, what do you call it? Like, it goes quite obscure sometimes in terms of their puzzles. Is that still the case in this newer one?
Yeah, this time around you've got a choice, like you did back in those games, of like an easy mode and a hard mode.
Okay.
So it reduces the amount of puzzles if you go for the easy option. Still kind of obscure, but very cool. And they have these really nice, like Ren and Stimpy style close-ups. They're just great adventure games.
Good stuff.
Last time we got a little bit of flack for not including probably my favourite game of all time, and that being Hollow Knight. Now this is a Metroidvania. It's classic Metroidvania now, and I know some people don't like that term, but it does all of the elements. You'll find new skills and abilities to unlock new areas. This one has, I would say, the Souls-like element in it as well, I think it's fair to say, because the combat is brutal. You'll need to go back to your body to get your souls back when you die. And yeah, I know there are some that don't like it, as I say, but it's around about 20 hours long for one run, and it's not as, I don't think it's as difficult as people make out. I think you do just need to do a bit of that pattern learning, you know?
Yeah. We spoke about this recently in another video, didn't we? Hollow Knight, and I think this was the game that kind of took Metroidvanias in a new direction. That's not to say that the old type of Metroidvania cannot exist anymore, but this does blend in those Dark Souls elements, as you just mentioned. But yeah, one for the masochists out there for sure.
Absolutely, and it definitely puts AAA to shame.
And the final one then, along with Hollow Knight really, one that should have been in last year's video, but the fact that it wasn't means we can talk about it now, and that's Stardew Valley. Now this farming sim really, I mean, this, as you said earlier, this is the epitome of what this video is about in terms of how well it handles its farming mechanics. It has a beautiful pixel style to it, where a lot of the other farming simulation franchises were starting to look towards 3D, even not necessarily a 3D camera, just that kind of 3D look on a 2D plane. And none of them were really nailing it. This one just stuck to its guns, went with that 2D look, and it looks lovely.
Yeah, it's one that I added co-op into, all the things that the community wanted. And isn't it funny, when you've got this relatively simplistic art style, then it's the gameplay that gets all the refinement, rather than just trying to look a certain way. And I think that's pretty relevant right now, isn't it, with some of the releases we've seen from huge studios. Absolutely.
And also, this, for a farm simulation game, actually has quite a deep story. You know, normally they give you that throwaway line of, here's a farm, someone's died, crack on. This tries to go past that and build on that in ways that you wouldn't necessarily expect.
Yeah, I've got an idea myself. Lord Bolger has handed you his estate.
Because he can't be bothered to do it himself. On you go.
Alright, so that takes us on to the end of this video and to 10 games that we think put AAA to shame. As for the whole of this series, we are giving away a Nintendo Switch OLED at the very end. All you need to do is just leave your comments. We're going to go through, collate the best ones, and then announce a winner on the last day.
Yeah, and that's all possible because of the company that help us with our website, and that's where we can also offer 10% off of eShop cards. So of course, the more you use that service, the more engagement they see on our channel, and the more potentially we can do things like this in the future.
Exactly, yeah. Use code SwitchUp over there to save yourself 10%. And that was a beautifully smooth transition, Glenn. I like that.
It wasn't bad at all, was it? A big thank you to our patrons and our channel members for all of your support.
For all things Switch, all the time, keep it Switch up. Happy Christmas.
Dramatic pause there.
That was a pause for effect, because you know what's coming.
Go on in.
See ya!